Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 81 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your host, Alex Schmitz, and today I am joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hey. So we are back after a bye week for Nebraska to discuss what happened in week 8 of college football, as well as what's coming up for next week and Nebraska's game against Indiana. But for those of you who are maybe listening to us for the first time, this is a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. We, of course, focus on our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, but we love all of college football, and that's primarily what we'll be discussing today, is because there were quite a few upsets that happened in Week 8 that we will get into. But before all that, I believe you have our traditional beverage to crack there, Dad?
I do, and you know, we haven't said it in a while, but we are a father-son duo who have just tried to put in the form of a podcast the comfortable discussions that we used to have when you were younger and still living under my roof, and we would hang out together and watch college football and then discuss it over the dinner table.
Yeah, and then you sold the house.
And then I sold the house. That is true. But yes, the beverage for today's episode is Alaskan Amber. This is a beer that quickly became my favorite during our trip to Alaska this past summer. And it's just a wonderful, ambers tend to be a little heavier beers oftentimes. But it's just a smooth, darker, amber type beer, but it's not heavy like some ambers can be. It just really goes down easily. I will tell you that, because on that trip I had a few.
I bet.
But your mother was kind enough to buy some for me so that I could enjoy a little after we returned home from the trip. Now, Alaskan Brewing Company is actually out of Juneau, Alaska, so it is a Alaskan-based company, and but they it's somewhat available. I mean, here in the lower 48, we're finding some success in being able to locate it even down here. So the exciting news is I don't have to go back to Alaska to get it.
That's always good.
So with that, I will go ahead and open that beverage. All right. Okay, there we go.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Cheers to you, my son.
All right. Cheers. Very good. Now, this weekend, I had another busy weekend. There's actually a animation film festival going on this weekend in Los Angeles that I participated in. So I didn't get the chance to watch many of the games, but I was following some of the scores on my phone. And as soon as I saw one score in particular, the biggest upset of the weekend, I texted you about it because it's a big deal for us in the Big Ten West. And that would, of course, be that Wisconsin lost to Illinois 24-23.
Yeah. Wow. That's all you can say, right? Is wow.
Yeah.
Probably the least successful team in the Big Ten West in recent years has been Illinois, and the most successful team has been Wisconsin. So that is about as big an upset as you could have drawn on paper.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and a team that Nebraska beat earlier this year in a close game, but we did manage to beat them, and Wisconsin didn't. So that's one thing we can have on our shoulder. I did watch the ESPN kind of replay going over the highlights of the game.
Okay.
And I believe Illinois was down like 23 to basically they were up by like 9 points with like 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Wisconsin was, and then Wisconsin had a fumble where they were like within the 20-yard line, so basically getting pretty close to scoring, and then they had a fumble which went to Illinois' way. And then on the next drive after Illinois scored, they threw an interception, which then let Illinois get the game-winning field goal to win the game. So
Right.
definitely there were mistakes Wisconsin made that Illinois
Oh yeah.
capitalized on, maybe
Well,
more
and
so.
some very questionable play calling, because at that point in the game, even after the fumble occurred, and then they allowed Illinois to move down the field and score, and to get close. Then on their next drive, they threw the ball three times, and on the third one, I believe, third pass, it was intercepted. So what are you doing when you're trying to basically run out the clock? You still have the lead by a couple of points, or a couple of points, and you've got Aaron Taylor, or not,
Jonathan
it's not
Taylor.
Aaron, Jonathan Taylor. Thank you, not Aaron. And I mean, you got Jonathan Taylor at running back, uh, or any of a number of other, Wisconsin running backs were outstanding. You just reemphasize ball security, and you send your team out there, and you run the ball, and you get a couple first downs, and the game's over, right? And you walk out of there wiping your brow and saying, "Whoo, that one was close," and let's learn from that and move forward. Instead, they throw the ball three times, which does two things. Obviously, it keeps the clock from moving the way you want it to, and burning it off, and then it also increases the likelihood that a mistake can happen. And sure enough, that's what happened. They threw a pick, and then all they had to do was march. A few. I'm thinking maybe 20, 25 yards. They got down, and that was close enough, and they got the field goal.
Hmm. Very
So
true.
bad coaching decision. I'm sure they're going to be reviewing that.
Oh yeah. Well, and you're right, because I remember it was Jonathan Taylor who fumbled the ball on the
Mm-hmm.
previous possession. So maybe they were a
Right.
little concerned about like giving it to him, even though he's their star
Yeah.
running back, obviously. But like you say, they have a lot of other good running backs too.
They do, and frankly, with a guy like that, you put him back out there, and he's so mad at himself because he's a professional and he works very hard, and he takes pride in what he does, obviously. So the chances that he's going to, um, you know, have a ball security problem on that next series is pretty small, especially given the circumstance. All we need is a first down. Let's get a couple first downs, and we're out of here, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So it just seems really, really crazy to me that they would have chosen, from an offensive coordination standpoint, to throw that football. But the and we'll talk a little further about the national implications of this loss, because they're huge for the Big Ten Conference and for Wisconsin, obviously. But there's also the message now. I'm not gonna do the comparative score. Oh, Nebraska beat Illinois, and therefore we might be able to beat Wisconsin. That's not where I'm going. But what it does convey is that there just there really aren't any dramatically great teams other than Ohio State and possibly Penn State. But even Penn State is a big notch below Ohio State within the conference, because now Wisconsin has had a couple of games that I would describe as close calls, games that where they struggled more than they should have. If a team was truly a complete team, dominant in all phases, focused, had the kind of culture and leadership for this season that you would describe as championship caliber, right?
Hmm.
And they've shown themselves to have some fragility there. And Illinois being able to beat them, I mean, they can beat Illinois with a C performance, right? They don't even need a B performance. They win with a C performance, but they turned in a D or a D minus performance because they were -2 in turnovers. They defensively, they've been dominant all season, shutting down everybody that they faced, basically. But then they allowed quite a significant number of significant rushing yards against Illinois. Illinois' running back, who caused us some problems. We knew he was good, and we said when we played Illinois that they had some talent. Their issue was more about just making enough mistakes, and self-destructing was one of their big issues, and they just self-destructed a little less against Wisconsin, and Wisconsin chose to give them opportunities.
Right. Well, but
So
you'll also recall that that whole self-destruction applies to us in that game big time because
absolutely
they got like two easy
right.
touchdowns off of our turnovers. You know,
All right.
if we had
Yeah,
cleaned up our act there, we would have beaten them by a lot more than what the final score
absolutely.
was.
We almost put 700 yards on that same defense at Illinois, and it was at Illinois, just like the Wisconsin game was. And yeah, I mean, but it just goes to show you that in the Big Ten Conference, anybody can beat anybody. And so, we'll get to this later when we get to talking Nebraska. I know we want to talk some other national stuff, so we'll get back to that conversation. But the bottom line is anybody can beat anybody, and especially in the Big Ten where you've got really good coaches pretty much across the board. So you better be ready every week.
hmm Now, that Wisconsin game was definitely the big upset of the weekend, but the big game of the weekend was also in the Big Ten, which we discussed on the last podcast, which was Michigan versus Penn State. We both gave predictions in terms of score.
Mm,
You predicted
yes.
that Penn State would win by about 10 points, and you said something in the range of like 17-28, something in that range.
Right.
Whereas I decided to go a little differently, just
A little lower.
no, I predicted Michigan would win, just to
Right.
kind of vary it up. And I said Michigan would win 21-10.
Right. I remembered it was the lower scoring too. Yeah.
Right. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I definitely did say 21-10. I'm looking at the scores wrong. I said 21-17. You said
Yes.
21-10. In
Mm,
terms of a score. And the final score
oh.
and the final score ended
Okay.
up being 28-21. So a
Hmm.
little higher scoring than
Yep.
either of us were expecting. Though I do know also from looking at the score breakdown that Penn State was up 21-0 in the second
Yep.
quarter.
Right.
So it kind of got off to a bad start for Michigan, but they kind of clawed their way back.
They did, and actually that's the thing. If you watch that game, play by play, drive by drive, you realize that if Michigan doesn't spot them, basically, okay, so you can't just blow off 21 points, but if Michigan just shows up to play on time, and actually, either is able to score and maybe keep themselves within 14 instead of letting it go to 21 like that, and it seemed like Penn State could do no wrong early in that game, like they were just going to blow them off the field. But then Michigan made adjustments, especially coming out after halftime. But really, even the last two or three drives before halftime, Michigan had already started to show that they had things a little more under control. And ultimately, Michigan has a dropped pass in the end zone that should have been caught. Had that been caught, then that game maybe is tied, and it's going into overtime. And frankly, all the momentum at that point would have been on Michigan's side because they would be the ones that would have been moving the football and having more success in that second half. So in many regards, I would say that Michigan can take not necessarily as moral victory or anything like that, but just to recognize that there is improvement there. They played Penn State in a whiteout game at Happy Valley, and after taking a beating in that initial surge from Penn State, which caused a 21-point deficit, they crawled back into a game they could have won.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that highlight with the player dropping the pass. And it wasn't the Penn State defender was right on him, so it definitely wasn't an easy catch, but it was in his hands. So, he was kicking himself about that one.
Oh yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep. So, but like you say, it does cement Penn State has remained undefeated. So they're
Yep.
now with Wisconsin losing, they're the only other undefeated. Well, no, there's also Minnesota who's undefeated. But in terms of having a chance to actually win the conference and be in the playoff, it's really Penn State and Ohio State as of right now. Anyway.
In all likelihood, yeah. I mean, I mean, there is a probability out there that would say Minnesota runs the table and wins the conference, and if they did and they beat, say Ohio State, maybe maybe they get in there
Oh yeah,
because
well,
then they would have beaten Wisconsin, they would have beaten Ohio State, so they would have some pretty big feathers in their cap. So maybe Minnesota
oh
would
well,
under
if
that scenario.
yeah, no, if they did that, if they beat Ohio State, if they beat everybody in their path and they were undefeated, then I think
Right.
you have to let them in at that point. But I think the likelihood of that scenario is quite low.
Yes, it is. I understand.
Even though Minnesota is playing well this season. Um,
They did against us.
yeah, we made them look great.
We made them look like they were Big Ten championship caliber teams because
Yeah.
we sucked.
Yes, we did. But we talked about that last week. We're not going into that today.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And then
Well,
the last game of note in the Big Ten that I wrote down is the Iowa versus Purdue. And Purdue played them close.
very good game.
Yeah, played them close. But Iowa ended up winning 26-20.
Yep. Yep. And I say that's a very good game. That's a misnomer. It was a classic Big Ten ugly brawl, is what it was. It was. It was just, but Iowa just had a few more horses, just made a couple more plays. But, for those who were maybe hoping that Purdue would still be kind of a lost team by the time that Nebraska sees them here in another couple of weeks here at the because we play them next. They are going to be sorely disappointed, and in all likelihood, their best player will play against Nebraska at Purdue in 2 weeks. Rondell Moore. They just announced today he's not likely to play this weekend in their game that Purdue plays this weekend, but I can almost guarantee you he will be ready to play against Nebraska.
That's just how it goes.
That's just how it goes.
That's right. All right. And then another interesting game, not so much for the score, but for what happened in it. Alabama beat Tennessee, who have been having a rough season. It's been a rough season to be a Noles fan. But Volunteers fan.
Yes.
But it's Vols is their nickname, right?
Vols. Yeah. Yep.
Vols.
Exactly. I thought you said Knowles, like as in Florida State, which it's also been a very rough year for them,
well,
as it turns out, because they lost by Wake Forest. So.
Yeah, that's true. I just now saw a little report on a rumor report that said that they may be looking into getting a new head coach.
For Tennessee?
No, Florida State.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's his first year or second year. I mean, he's just got there.
Yeah.
That's the guy that used to be the coach at Oregon. And he is like an alumnus or so. I don't know. There's some connection between him and Florida State. That would be amazing if they did that, because they already did that once, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking through that properly, but that seems like he hasn't been there but a year or two.
Right. But the important thing in that Alabama game is that their star quarterback Tua got an ankle injury. Not like season ending or anything, but
right.
People are wondering if he'll be ready or if
available.
Right. Well, if he'll be available for the LSU game they have in 2 weeks. But then also, even if he is ready to play, quote unquote, will he be 100%? Essentially.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
Yes. So obviously they're the number 1 ranked team. Everyone has them down to likely go to the playoffs, but they do have some of their tougher games here near the end of the season. So
yes,
they would like to have him around.
Absolutely. And again, those kinds of things, it's not typical for Alabama to have injuries to major stars like that very often. They're so athletically superior to most teams they play that tends not to happen. Not that they don't get injuries. That's not true. There have been years when they've gotten a lot of injuries, but
this year's been one of them.
Right, exactly. But usually they have so much talent that it's hardly noticeable.
Right. Another interesting game in the SEC, Florida played against South Carolina, who obviously beat Georgia a few weekends ago, and Florida pulled it out 38-27. But I believe South Carolina was up at the end of the third quarter, and Florida kind of went on a scoring spree right there near the end.
Correct. That is correct. So that's the second week in a row, though, that South Carolina has played above what people perceive them as. So interesting that they have stepped up their game, and then a credit to Florida that they were able to find a way. You know, I don't know. It's pretty amazing. It'll be interesting to watch what happens at South Carolina the rest of the year. They've had one huge win and now an almost win. So a lot of positive things going on there.
Yep, that's for sure. And then a big game in the Pac-12. Oregon played against Washington and won 35-31 in a close game.
Yes. And that was a comeback also, was it not?
It was, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a theme there with some of these, games kind of emphasizing the importance of a game is 60 minutes in length, right?
Yep.
You got to play for 60 minutes. And it just seems like a lot of times, even the Michigan Penn State game kind of was playing out that way. I mean, Penn State looked like the clearly superior team. And I would think that, some people who watched that Oregon game might have felt that Washington was the superior. Was it Washington? Who it was Oregon against?
Washington, yep.
Washington or Washington State. Okay, it's Washington. That's right. And, they were leading most of the game, and you would have thought they were the better team. And then Oregon got it together and then all of a sudden looked unstoppable at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then this one was interesting. Boise State played against BYU, and I believe Boise State was undefeated, and they were ranked 14th in the AP poll. But BYU ended up beating them 28-25. So that's a little upset.
That is an upset, and that was a critical upset because had Boise State not lost that game, then I think that their schedule is such, because of the league that they play in, was such that it would have been somewhat unlikely that they would have sustained another loss. So having Boise State lose here was devastating to Boise State and probably took them out of the mix, for conversations of undefeated teams that were, quote, quote, from the group of five that were deserving of,
being talked about.
Yeah, right. Deserving of playoff consideration.
Right. And then another interesting upset, Vanderbilt beat our old friends Missouri 21-14.
Yes.
Quite a surprise.
Yes, it is. And because people have been really high on Missouri, and specifically, they've got the transfer quarterback who's come in and done very well for them at Missouri. And so that, I'm sure, was very disappointing. And also that Florida State game I mentioned a little earlier in the podcast, Wake Forest, who's playing very well and has had a very good season in the ACC, but still, just from a traditional standpoint, to see a Florida State getting beat by, Wake Forest is not something you see every day. So I was right. Willie Taggart was the Oregon football coach in 2016 and 2017, and he's only been at Florida State since 2017. So this is just his. What is it? So his first football season was 2018. So this is just his second year as head coach there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy. And of course, see, the thing is that what's causing all this consideration is the fact that Urban Meyer is sitting in a studio at Fox Sports and is potentially available. And everybody who wants to swing for the fences and thinks they have a chance at Urban Meyer is going to take it and wants to be the one that wins the prize. Now, I have a feeling that Urban Meyer might very well stay on the sidelines for at least another year and let the angst and excitement about his possibility, grow even more, over the next year before he actually goes back in. I think only sitting out 1 year won't be enough. He'll have to sit out 2 years, and then he'll get back in. The one exception to that might be USC, although Florida State, given that he has great history with Florida, that would be such a slap in the face to his years at the University of Florida. I think he would tend to avoid that. I think he would say no to Florida State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree. And, obviously he says that, he's looking to spend more time with his family. He's trying to
Right.
work on his health, all that sort of stuff. But we've seen plenty of coaches say that in the past and then kind of pick it back up, like you say, after a year or two.
Well, he's already done that once, though. He's retired and come back already once.
Right.
And, both times it was for supposedly different health related reasons. But, you get away from it and you miss it, right? You miss the camaraderie, you miss the intensity. And Urban is definitely a guy who's been a coach his whole life. I think his dad was a coach. I mean, it's in his blood. So I'm sure that although he probably enjoys the camaraderie he's got with the people at the Fox Sports, he will probably want to jump back in at some point. And he's young and healthy enough yet that he could still coach for 8 or 10 years somewhere and maybe pursue being the first coach ever to win national championships at 3 schools. A number of coaches have won at 2, including him, but no one has won at 3 Division I schools. So if he could take over, say, a tradition-rich program like USC, that might have a little appeal to Urban Meyer.
Interesting. I didn't know that stat.
Yeah.
That's kind of a fun
Yeah.
dream to chase.
Well, exactly. It would maybe be something he could use as a justification to say, hey, when somebody at University of Southern California calls you and asks if you would take their job, you don't just reject them out of hand. You listen.
Yeah.
And I think he would. Whereas FSU, although it's very tradition rich also, I think it's more of a dumpster fire. I think there's more issues there than there would be at USC. And with the emergence of University of Central Florida and Florida's reemergence already, Florida State's going to have a little harder hill to climb to get back up into real consideration,
Right.
And
whereas
if you,
I was going to say, and we're in an era right now where the Pac-12 doesn't really have a standout
right.
team. Oregon is doing pretty well this year, but they already have one loss. And USC has all the resources in the world and
Absolutely.
is the biggest school in California for football and all that. So you don't have as much competition.
Right. I agree completely.
Yep.
And so I think that that might be one of those windows of opportunity. The only other one I could think of would be Oklahoma. If for some reason Lincoln Riley was to be enticed into, say, an NFL job after another successful season at Oklahoma, and if he really has a NFL bug in him, to go try it out, then this might be his chance because he's going to get offers.
Mm-hmm.
And if he did that, then the Oklahoma job comes open. That would probably be the only other job that Urban would want to consider, or would be willing to consider. So there's a side note about coaching carousel, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about in future podcasts, not this one.
Yes, we certainly will. All right, so just a few more to get through here quickly.
Yeah.
Texas beat Kansas in a total shootout, 50-48.
Yes.
So good on Kansas for hanging in there. Obviously, another kind of they did better than what their public perception is.
Mm-hmm.
Situation. That's right. And then you actually gave a couple little minor score predictions on the last podcast. The Arizona State Utah game was another Pac-12 game, and you thought that Arizona State would win by 3 points or so.
Yeah.
And then Utah beat them 21-3. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. Arizona State's been having a very good season. It seemed like they were building some positive momentum, and I wasn't sure about where Utah was at. So I thought that they might be getting them at a good time, and that that positive momentum might carry forward. But clearly, it didn't. And actually, I think 21-3 may not even reflect how dominant Utah beat them. So So that I was way wrong on that.
Yeah. You were right on this other one, though. You were talking about the Baylor game, and you predicted that they were going to win, and they did against
Yeah.
Oklahoma State 45-27.
Yep. Yep. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? So
That's right.
that's why I don't gamble very much,
Yeah.
son. That's why gambling is it's a sad, it's for entertainment purposes only.
That's a good lesson to live by there.
Exactly.
All right. And then the last game we're going to discuss is about our upcoming opponent, Indiana, who played against
Yes.
Maryland this past weekend and beat them 34-28. Although it's worth noting that they were playing with their second team quarterback for the majority of the game because the first teamer got hurt.
Right. And
Though it seems like the people generally thought the second team quarterback played well. He did
he
pretty good
did.
for
He
them.
absolutely did. And frankly, they that was a preseason battle, so those two were viewed as being very similar, kind of neck and neck battle for who was going to start. So I don't think they view it as much of a drop off. Whichever one of them is playing, the one who had been starting was a freshman and seemed to have maybe a little bit more of a higher ceiling than the kid who played most of this last game against Maryland. So, but the thing is that Indiana is a team that's got some sneaky talent. They're very big and physical, especially their offensive line and defensive line. Very big. So it's not like you're going to be going up and having some big, mismatch where Nebraska's going to be the bigger team. We're again playing a team that is every bit as big as us and probably bigger, and in all likelihood has more players that have been in a legitimate strength and conditioning program for more years. It's going to be an interesting one. And Maryland is a team that I cannot figure out because they have been all over the map. They have dominated some teams and looked great doing it. And so it appears to me that they have some individual skill talent that is quite good, but that they're missing some things maybe along the lines of scrimmage because when they face a tougher opponent, somebody who's got a little bit more of a salty defense, they tend to just collapse into not doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I would tend to agree. They have some very contrasting scores throughout the year.
they
Um,
they really do. It's hard to figure out which team's going to show up.
Right. And I also watched the little ESPN highlights of this game,
Hmm.
the Indiana Maryland game, and I would agree with you. It definitely looks like Indiana has some offensive talent. Obviously these highlights were just showing the scores basically for both teams, so it doesn't really show much about the defenses per se. But I'm definitely thinking that in terms of our game coming up against them this weekend, they're going to score some points on us, and so a lot's going to rely on us being able to score on them in return, which obviously leaves a big question mark in terms of if Adrian Martinez is going to play, and our situation with our running backs, given what's happened today, things of that nature.
Right. Yeah. There's so many unknowns, and in fact we are not the favorite. We are the underdog by 2 points at this point.
Hmm.
So
I did see that. Now, I think, at least in terms of what's being said by the coaches and things of that nature, it seems like they did take your advice to heart in terms of like that Minnesota game was a kind of a turning point, and it's either kind of get up or shut up, at this point for everybody involved. And we've seen that Maurice Washington will not be playing in this game against Indiana for violating internal team rules that have not been specified. And it's questionable whether he'll play again for the rest of the season, which
right,
is obviously
or ever for Nebraska.
right, which is obviously disappointing given his talent level. But at the same time, he wasn't playing like he wanted to be there the past couple games. So I think it's best to get him
Right.
off the field and give somebody who actually wants to prove himself the opportunity.
Exactly. I agree. I mean, I love his talent, and I was hopeful that he would reward Nebraska's coaches and his position coach specifically, who had hung with him through an awful lot, who recruited him and held open a full scholarship at a major Power Five program for him while he was, trying to figure out his academics coming out of high school. He got kicked out of school his senior year. I mean, he had some issues, both academically and obviously away from the field in the classroom too. And so, he came with a lot of baggage, and our coaches, hung with him and basically coddled him through his senior year, hoping that they could get him into the structure of a Power Five program like ours in Lincoln, and he would be able to stabilize in that, and then be allowed over the period of a couple of years to commit himself to getting better and becoming the student that he needed to be, so that he could mature, right, and then become the player he could become. Because he's immensely talented. When that guy wants to play football and is healthy, he is probably one of the best backs in the country. I mean, he's shown us those flashes, right? But his ability to stay on the field physically, because he didn't consistently work out with the kind of intensity that's necessary at the Power Five level, he apparently has had a number of problems with being disciplined with his schedule, and so he's missed meetings, been late to team functions, et cetera, and maybe some classes as well. So there were a number of issues, and then obviously he had off the field legal issues that were compounded because he had multiple things with a marijuana arrest while over the summer while in Lincoln. So he just didn't know how to keep his nose clean and just stay focused long enough to help get himself out of trouble. Right? He just can't get out of his own way. So it's sad, but and it didn't sound like Scott had closed the door on him completely. But I think he basically said, "I'm not going to spend a lot more time, uh, you know, pursuing this kid. I am now going to wait for him to maybe have the aha moment that is necessary and come back to the team." So I think the door might be open for him to come back, serve whatever penance Scott throws at him, and then just move on. But he's not gonna keep putting up with whatever Maurice has been doing.
Yeah.
And that's sad, because we definitely need his talent, or talent like his, in our football team, and we don't have it right now. So it hurts. There's no doubt that hurts.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I remember, in some of the games earlier this year, he showed some of those flashes of talent. Like I remember in that first game of the
Illinois.
year, when
Yeah.
he came back in the second half after being suspended for the first, he had a couple of big runs that helped us out
Yep.
when our offense
Yep.
needed it. Um,
Well, he had a great game against Illinois. He had some really good plays against Northern Illinois early in the season. I mean, and in the second half out at Colorado, when everything else seemed to be going to crap, he was the one guy that gave us glimpses of success out there. So I mean, it's not like he is not a good talent. I won't say that. He is very talented. So
yep. Yep. But like we said, the way he's kind of seems to have lost some of his motivation because of some
yeah,
of these off the field issues and feeling like he's being treated unfairly or whatever it is. You need
well,
that mental
he's a
toughness.
right. He's a kid who's spent his whole life uh, being able to pout and then ultimately get his way because of probably some, you know, what do I want to say, adult supervision or adult behavior in his life that didn't call him and hold him accountable, and then nor did probably many coaches or anyone who tried to. He just quit. In fact, he's been at Nebraska for about 2 years, which is the longest he's been at any school since he was like in junior high, because he went from school to school to school throughout his high school years. So he has not been somebody that could, hang in there through any kind of adversity anywhere. and so you knew you had a challenge on your hands when he arrived, but you were hopeful that maybe the structure of a Power Five football program and all the cushy amenities that provides you would have given him enough motivation, and then the maturity would eventually come, and it would be a thing of the past. But nope, he blew it.
Yep.
So
Yep. So it is what it is. In terms of this upcoming game, as kind of like I said before, my kind of prediction is that Indiana is definitely going to score on us. They have the talent to do so from what
yeah,
I've seen.
yep,
It is at home for Nebraska, which
yes,
definitely helps us out. Um,
yes,
and I think, and I feel like this has been a theme for a lot of the year, but a lot of it is going to rely on how good our offense plays, whether that's Adrian or Vedral, who is running the offense that particular day. And also, some of it also, I think, falls on Scott, certainly in terms of the play calling, getting less conservative, hoping that we can kind of get some pace established early on so that we can run the hurry up offense that he wants to run, and get some success early that we can capitalize on. I think if they score on us and we can't score back, for like the whole first quarter, and the first quarter kind of goes badly for us, it has the potential to spiral out of control if that mental weakness that we kind of saw in the Minnesota game rears its ugly head. But I'm hopeful
right.
that won't be the case.
Well, and because these are good coaches at Indiana, again, I'm going to go back to something that I'm kind of pounding now as a theme, which is, the money that the Big Ten has through its, athletic arrangements, its contracts. Everybody has money. They all have the money to hire really good coaches, and so you can just bank on it that the coaches over there on that other sideline from Indiana, they are going to have their team ready. And so we have to match that, both in intensity and intelligence, right? And I think, frankly, that Scott has taken a few in the chin from an educational standpoint as a young Big Ten Power Five coach. He's had to take a few lumps here this year to learn that you better not neglect the intensity side of things. One of the things that came out of this bye week was that the bye week practices were some of the most intense practices they've had, all season. Certainly since fall camp was done. Well, why is that? Why would you allow your team to get so soft that a performance like the Minnesota game happens? And how can you not know that you're headed for something like that? Usually a coaching staff has some sense of whether their guys are really intense into it or not. And if they're not, then you change things up before you get embarrassed on TV, if you can, right? That seems like that would have been the preferred thing to do if you're aware of it. So that tells me Scott wasn't sensitive to that. He didn't have that kind of sixth sense of, is my team ready to take this on or not?
Mm-hmm.
But I can guarantee you they're going to do that. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I don't think Scott's going to open things up. I think the opposite's going to happen. I think Scott is going to he has talked about going back to the basics. I think the game plan is going to represent a far smaller number of plays than what they've probably been using in previous weeks. They've probably been repping the plays that are in that game plan at a higher rate on a per day basis because there's fewer of those plays that they're repping through. And when you play more physically, it takes a little time. You can't quite get as many reps in. We hear a lot in our practices about how fast the pace is and how many reps they get in. Well, you know what? It is an old adage from many football coaches, and certainly a few that I had, that you say practice does not make perfect. The generic phrase that is often used is to say practice makes perfect. And obviously, the more you practice, say the guitar or whatever, right, the better you're going to get. But in a sport like football or basketball or anything like that, a proper coach would tell you, no, no, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Right.
And what you're trying to say there is, it doesn't matter if you get 10 reps of that play, if every time you rep it, somebody's doing something wrong out of those 11 players, right? The only way that that play got practiced is if it was perfectly executed, right? And so, how many perfect practice reps did you get versus how many practice reps did you get? Okay, and so I think there's a little of that's having to be adjusted to in this bye week. And there's also been a lot of talk about, are we going to see a bunch of new faces? And I think you'll see some new faces out on the field in reserve roles. There might be one. Well, I'm almost certain that Cade Warner, who is now healthy, and he's been healthy for a couple of weeks. I think he was fully healthy, and he traveled with the team to Minnesota, but he didn't get on the field until the game was decided in the fourth quarter, and then immediately got 3 receptions for like 40 yards. I think you're going to see Cade Warner be on the field a lot, especially if Wandell is still not available. But even if Wandell is, I'm hopeful that they're going to probably take some snaps away from one of my targets from last week, which was Noah Kanoi Noah, who I think has been effectively non-existent. He's been a ghost this entire season, and we need somebody to take his position who actually can do something. At least Cade Warner blocks like a madman. So I at least will get a better blocker out of my wide receiver if I put Cade out there. Now, I'm not saying Cade's a better athlete, because he's not. I'm not going to say that Cade's got better speed, because he doesn't. But I do know that Cade's going to give 100%. He's probably not going to make very many mental mistakes, and he will be where he's supposed to be when it comes to blocking. And that will help our running game. So I'm hopeful that Cade Warner takes a lot of Noah's snaps away. Also, I think on the offensive line, there's a lot of buzz that there's going to maybe be a little bit of shifting going on there, and that we're going to probably see a little more rotation on the offensive line, so guys at least are starting to get some snaps, because our offensive line has been so horrible. And, the coach keeps saying there's a bunch of guys that are close. They're almost there. They're almost there. I think we're at the point in the season where the coaches are going to just thrust some guys out there because they got no choice. If they're that close, we got to find out if they're there.
Right.
Even if they're maybe not showing it with the consistency that the coach would like in practice.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is that because I was thinking about this earlier, is that if we do play Adrian, because he's had the extra bye week to heal up and everything, but he goes out there, and has some missed passes, and kind of shows off some of the things he's been struggling with earlier this year. I think that after seeing what Vedral has done so far, I think the coaches will be more open to letting him come in to try to spark things up if that's what's needed.
I agree with you, and I also believe that this is probably a game, because it's a must-win for us. It's a home game against a team that we should believe we can beat. And if you look at the rest of our schedule, with Wisconsin and Iowa still out there on the schedule, those are 2 games that we're probably not likely to be viewed as even close. You know what I mean? We'll probably be double-digit underdog to Wisconsin, and maybe a 7 to 10 point underdog to Iowa at this point. So if you're going to use your 4 games available to your freshmen, this Indiana game would be one you would choose. Mm-hmm. So I would expect, with the Maurice Washington situation, we're going to see Ramir Johnson, the running back, the freshman running back, and we've got 2 games left for our freshman quarterback. And so I'm sure he's at least going to be available. And especially with Adrian's questionable availability, I know they would love to save McCaffrey for the horrible just in case that Adrian isn't able to get back, or he comes back and then is immediately injured again because he comes back too soon, then you really need McCaffrey. Well, at that point, frankly, if it happens in this game against Indiana, then McCaffrey's red shirt's going to be burned anyway, in all likelihood. So, so I think you put all the cards on deck. I think McCaffrey is probably in the game plan to be used if needed, without hesitation. And so that if Adrian was to not be ready or to go out there and perform poorly, I totally agree. I think they would go to Vedral with the full confidence that if Vedral were to get dinged up as in the course of the game, that they would go to McCaffrey, and that would be that.
All right.
So, yeah. But I'm looking for simple game plan. I agree with you though about pace. I think that we will try to go fast in this game. Where if we have some success and get a first down, you can expect to see us go fast.
All right. Yep. So my score prediction is going to be, I think Indiana's going to score on us, like I mentioned earlier. So I think they'll get 35 on us, kind of like they did in the Maryland game.
Wow.
But
Okay.
But I think we're going to score 38 back and win in a close match. But we're going to pull up the win and set our season up for more potential success.
Okay. Wow, I love it. I love your glass is half full. Okay. I am because I am also a Nebraska fan, like you, son. I am going to predict a Nebraska victory, even though we are an underdog in this situation. And I'm making this prediction based on hope that Scott is doing the kinds of things over the course of this week to get his team mentally ready and to come out with an intensity that will translate on the field. I don't believe we'll be out-athleted by Indiana. I think we have athletes to match up with them, both defensively and offensively. I don't think we're superior in any way, but I think we can match up with this team. And so it's all about intensity and want to. And after being embarrassed, I'm expecting a Nebraska team that is inspired and maybe feeling a little chipper and more healthy because of that bye week. So hopefully, when it comes game day, our guys are going to be ready to go. Now, I have some cautionary concerns, but like turnovers and just stupid mental mistakes, rearing their ugly head, and then in the frustration spiraling on us in a negative way. But I'm going to resist that and say we're going to win. But I don't think we're going to score very many points. I think we got to keep them. They cannot score more than 21. If they score more than 21, I think it's going to be very hard for us to win that football game because I think we're not going to be able to score more than 28. And I believe our field goal kicker situation is still a disaster. So I don't think we'll be trying a whole lot of field goals. So I'm going to say 28-21 Nebraska.
All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out next week. That's for sure.
There you go.
All right.
There you go. Well, it's a huge game. It's a huge game for Nebraska fans.
Well, yes, I'd like to remind you, you've said that like all the past games since the loss to Ohio State have been huge games.
Well, they are. I mean, but for different reasons. I guess maybe I should clarify that. The difference is the reason. Earlier in the season, I was hopeful that we would be in the thick of the hunt for the Big Ten West. And right now, statistically or whatever, you'd say we still are because we're only one game away from Wisconsin, who still has to play Ohio State. But Wisconsin's got a loss. We've got 2 losses. Iowa's got 2 losses. So, and we play both Wisconsin and Iowa, and we've already played Ohio State, and our remaining schedule, includes those 2 teams that we play head to head. So frankly, the Big Ten West is still available to us statistically, right? I mean, it's a possibility, but realistically, my goal has shifted from Big Ten West to just getting to 6-6 so that we can have a bowl game and get those extra practices. That's the most important thing to us. And I think it will be a huge effort for us to get there because we've got effectively 3 games, this one this weekend, Purdue the following week, and the Maryland game as the 3 most likely games to get 2 wins. So 2 of those games we got to find a way to win them. And now if we get our 6 wins, then I'll maybe change my focus again. But right now, I'm not sure we can get to 6 wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I just looked it up because there was one team in there that you neglected to mention, which was Minnesota, of course, who is now the leader in the West thanks to Wisconsin's loss.
True, Minnesota
However,
Wisconsin.
they have a very tough end of their year. They play against Maryland coming up here.
That's this weekend. Yeah.
Yep. And then looks like after that they may have a bye, and then they play Penn State, into Iowa, into Northwestern, into Wisconsin. So
right, I know.
So it's a tough road
you'd look at it and say they can beat Northwestern, and they play Wisconsin, who they beat last year, and that game against Wisconsin at the end of the year will be probably for the Big Ten West Championship, unless the wheels come off for Minnesota and or Wisconsin, because Wisconsin still got to lose a couple more times before we would ever be in the conversation. That's why the idea of winning the Big Ten West is pretty much a pipe dream for us. I mean, it's statistically possible, but probability is very, very small.
Oh yeah,
because so I mean, I'm not overly optimistic on that, but the thing is every one of these teams we still have to play, we can beat every one of them, including Wisconsin and Iowa. None of them are unbeatable. Right. All of them have, flaws. So we could win them all, but we could also lose them all. And it's probably more likely that we tend and are trending towards the 0-5 than the 5-0.
Yes, that is certainly true. Yes, and I totally agree with you. The Nebraska fans should be send their sights away from the Big Ten West if they don't want to be disappointed. I think getting to 6 or 7 wins would be our goal right now.
Well, yeah, it is just acknowledging where we're at, and I think everybody just needs to understand that we are a lot farther away on so many levels than we realized we were.
Yep.
So.
All right, and then. There's obviously that very important game in Week 9 for us Nebraska fans, but in terms of the national perspective, there are actually several big games coming up this weekend.
Yes, there are.
The biggest in terms of the Big Ten being Wisconsin versus Ohio State. Now it is at home for Ohio State in Columbus, which obviously gives them the advantage, and they're now the 3rd-ranked team overall in the AP poll. People are very high on them. But if Wisconsin, if they are able to bounce back after this disappointing loss to Illinois and pull out an upset against Ohio State, then that really throws the Big Ten into chaos, because then our number 1 team also has 1 loss. So it's going to be very interesting for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a huge game for Ohio State for obvious reasons. But it's, like you said, even bigger for the Big Ten Conference, because the Big Ten Conference needs Ohio State to win this game. And this is, if you ever, conspiracy theorists are already on high alert to be watching for, little no calls and ticky-tack calls that are made all to go in favor of Ohio State and against Wisconsin, to make sure that reality happens, type of thing. I mean, the conspiracy theorists would argue that that's already, the wheels are already in motion to make sure that happens, because we cannot afford as a league to go a 3rd year without being a part of the college football playoff. And right now, Ohio State is solidly in it. All Ohio State has to do is do what they're already expected to do, which is win the rest of their games in this conference and ultimately win the Big Ten Conference. And if they do that, undefeated, they will be in the playoffs, no doubt. I can't see a scenario where that wouldn't happen now at this point.
Yep.
But the issue is they need Wisconsin to they need to beat Wisconsin this weekend, and then they need Wisconsin to proceed to remain competitive and legitimate. And it would be a huge help. Another game you're going to probably talk about is Michigan Notre Dame.
Yes.
And that game, I tell you what, Ohio State fans should be Michigan fans this weekend, because that game, Michigan Notre Dame, is huge for Ohio State, because they need Michigan to win that game, so that adds another feather in the Big Ten cap against a legitimate non-conference opponent. So that when the conversations start to happen with that college football playoff committee, there's another feather in the cap when they ultimately beat Michigan, and then that Michigan team has more credibility because of a victory against Notre Dame. Because right now Michigan doesn't have much of a credible wins from the standpoint that, they've played Penn State and Wisconsin and lost them both, right? Most of the other games they've played are teams that they should have beaten.
Right. No, that's certainly true. Though also with what the playoff has kind of taught us over the years, as we saw with like Alabama getting in, even with their
Right.
losses and not being the conference champion, over some Big Ten teams with better schedules on paper, is that
Right.
that record really matters a lot to them. If you're undefeated, that matters a lot. So
Yep.
even if you haven't beat the best teams per se, but you make it through and you beat two great good teams along the way, that people respect, and then you remain undefeated and you win your conference championship game, by the end of the year, I don't anticipate there being that many other undefeated teams to really challenge Ohio State to get in. But I understand your point either way in terms of strength of schedule. It's to Ohio
Right.
State's advantage for Michigan to still
Right.
be perceived well.
Exactly. And that's my point. I don't want to say it's the be all and end all, and if Michigan ends up losing to Notre Dame, that doesn't destroy Ohio State's chances or anything like that. It's just another one of those little in your gut arguments that people will have to say, well, as it turns out, Ohio State might be undefeated, but they played in a conference that looks like it wasn't very good, because Wisconsin ends up losing a couple of games. Michigan lost 4 games. Penn State lost 2 games. All of a sudden, you know what I mean? You could start to make arguments that, well, the best team they played all season was Penn State, and that wasn't all that big a deal.
Right.
So I mean and if you end up you're trying to decipher between them and an undefeated Oklahoma for the 4th spot, let's say, because Notre Dame, wins every other game that they play, and so now you're looking at a Clemson, an Alabama, a Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Ohio State all being undefeated, and with Notre Dame having 1 loss, well, then Notre Dame's probably out. But you get my drift. If as things play out, there is some debate there.
Yes.
It would give Ohio State no room for error. If they lose 1 game, they're out.
Right. That is true. That is true. And speaking of Penn State, they play against Michigan State this weekend at Michigan State. Now, obviously, a game that Penn State should be expected to win, especially given that they just beat Michigan this past weekend. However, certainly not a gimme game. And if they kind of sleepwalk into it, I think they'll be in for a rude awakening.
Well, and it's not even so much about sleepwalking, Alex. Think about the Penn State schedule over the last 2 weeks, and now this being the 3rd week. They had to play Iowa at Iowa, then they had to play Michigan at home, and now they have to go on the road again and play Michigan State at Michigan State. That third tough game in a row, very physical teams. Iowa, always a very physical defense. Michigan, one of the top 10 defenses in the country. And now you got to go to Michigan State, another team that, although they have shown some major weaknesses defensively that were unexpected, I think some of the defensive lapses that Michigan State has had are not about individual players as much as they are about their offense being so inept that they leave their defense out there so long that eventually it breaks down.
Right.
And so I'm not going to say Michigan State is fielding their best ever defense or anything, but they're going to be ready to play, and it's at home, and it's kind of a do or die game for Michigan State for their season. So I think they're going to get Michigan State's best effort. No doubt about it. And if Penn State walks in there as a wounded duck because they've had a couple of physical games and travel and all that sort of stuff, it's a trap game a little bit for Penn State, I believe. I could see them letting off the gas just a little bit and then finding themselves in a four quarter dogfight.
Yeah, very true. And since you brought up that Notre Dame Michigan game earlier, what do you think Michigan's chances are? It is being played at the Big House at
Yes, it
Michigan.
is.
Um,
Yes, it is.
and
I think Michigan's got a chance. I've seen enough of Michigan's improvement since their loss to
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. You know, the Wisconsin game was an embarrassment for them. That was not Michigan football. But since that time, their defense continues to get better, and they're really being active and more aggressive. And I think it was a wake up call that Wisconsin game. And so I expect Michigan to have a very active defense. I still am not a believer in Michigan's offense, however, and I think that's the part that will let them down here this weekend if something does. So what they need to have happen is they need some big plays. They need their wide receivers to make some spectacular plays. They need a kickoff return, punt return type of change the flip the field kind of thing. They need some help on that in that third phase. And if they could get it, I think they could have a win. Notre Dame, on the other hand, I believe was off last week, so they had a bye week, if I'm remembering correctly. So they've had 2 weeks to prepare for Michigan. So Notre Dame's going to be well coached, probably well rested, and ready to just go in there and take it, right? So I predict that Notre Dame will ultimately win the football game, but I have a feeling it's going to look a little bit like the Penn State game, where Notre Dame might come out and have a few tricks up their sleeve and such that gives them early momentum. But then over the course of the game, Michigan rights itself and then ends up being pretty close at the end.
That's right. And just looked up. You are correct. They beat USC, but in a close game that USC almost won, and then they had a bye week. So they have had an extra week to prepare for this game.
Yeah. So that's why I'm going to give Notre Dame the nod, even though it is at the Big House. Um, and I believe that Notre Dame will have some early success, but then Michigan will come back and make it close. Now, as far as what the score will be, boy, it's hard to tell. But I think it'll be maybe somewhat similar to our score, in the 20s, right? Maybe the winner goes to 31 and the losers 28. So it's 31-28 Notre Dame.
All right, 31-28 Notre Dame. Well, since you gave a score, I guess I have to now too. Um, I'll go ahead and just for the sake of it, I think you're right in that it'll be a close game, not super high scoring. But I'm going to predict that Michigan is able to bounce back from the disappointing loss to Penn State, since they showed that they were able to adapt in that game. And that they'll maybe this time that kid will catch the pass that gets thrown over in the end zone and end up winning. So I'm going to say they win 31-28. How about that?
I love it. You always let me predict first, and then you work off of my numbers.
Well, fine. Here.
Okay, what about Ohio State? What about Ohio State, Wisconsin? Why don't you pick that one?
Yeah, all right. I'll go first there. I'm going to definitely pick Ohio State. I do think that, especially given that it's being played in Columbus, and just the level of talent that they've showed off this year, that they're going to be able to pull that one out. And there's kind of a lot up in the air for Wisconsin if they'll be able to bounce back or not. But I tend to think that Wisconsin will make it interesting at least. So let's say 35 for OSU and 28 for Wisconsin.
All right. I'm going to say 35 for OSU, and I'm going to say 21 for Wisconsin.
All right. Fair enough. And then there's one last game, which is, in terms of national perspective, probably the biggest game of the weekend. Auburn versus LSU in the SEC, with LSU ranked second and Auburn ranked ninth in the current AP poll. At LSU, benefiting them. Obviously, Auburn has had a pretty good season, though they do have one loss, whereas LSU is undefeated. So this is going to be a big challenge for LSU. So what are your thoughts on this game?
My thoughts on this game are that LSU is right in the wave of a senior quarterback who's really confident and playing well in Burrows, Joey Burrows. And so I think, and it's home, LSU game at night, probably. I don't know the exact time, but I'm pretty sure since it's the big game of the weekend, it's going to be at night. It's really hard to beat LSU at night. I think LSU wins this game. But like you said, Auburn's defense is pretty good. I'm not a big believer in Auburn's offense, specifically Auburn's quarterback. Not that their offense isn't good, but that their quarterback is just good. He's not a difference maker. Boy, I can't remember his last name, Ricks, or he's the son of a past quarterback from them, so he's a second generation guy. But Hicks, I don't know. It's a 3-letter name. And he, but my perception of him is that he's good, he's solid, but he's not spectacular. And so the quarterback duo goes in favor of LSU, and LSU wins under the lights at the Death Valley and wins the game. Now, what's the score going to be? Boy, there's always when Auburn's involved, crazy scores happen. LSU will look great defensively early in the game, and then Auburn will score 20 points on them in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's going to just be something really crazy like that. But LSU is going to ultimately win by about 10 points. But I have no idea what the totals are going to be. Right. But it's going to be a 10-point victory for LSU.
Well, I'm going to go a little differently. Just looking back, LSU did play against Florida earlier this year and beat them 42-28. And that same Florida team played against Auburn and managed to beat them in a closer game. But that sounds about right to me in terms of score. 42-28, I think, is going to be what LSU wins by against Auburn.
Okay. All right. Well, and if LSU's offense scores 48 against, 42 against Auburn's defense, then that sets up really well for that following week against Alabama. My thing would be is that I think LSU will be held down a little bit by just a little bit of peeking ahead to the following week. That they're going to be looking ahead to the Alabama showdown, and so they won't be quite as sharp as they might be, and that will keep them from scoring, a shit ton of points.
Right. Yeah, that very well could be. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for this week. There's a lot of excitement to look forward to this week in college football, whether you're a Nebraska fan or just a general fan.
That's right. Big games.
That's right. Everyone loves the big games. We're getting to that point in the season now. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can find us online if you search for College Football Throwdown. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Leave us a review there and a rating. Let us know what you think of the podcast. You can also find us on Podomatic.com. And, of course, you can reach out to us via email at huskerpete13@gmail.com if you want to reach out to us with a question that we can read on air on the podcast. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you for joining me, Dad. And
you're welcome.
Yes, and until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.